Dan, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, Paul, great to connect. Always good to speak to other people interested in biotech and life science content and everything that goes around that.
So let's just get started with Co-Labb. I want to hear the story behind that. What inspired you to start the agency in a sea of science and medical writing agencies, especially in the UK?
I think, it happened quite organically. So I did start freelancing myself as a sort of scientific writer and a content writer as early as my first year of my PhD. And I quite quickly realized that there was a sort of an issue somewhat in sort of scientific companies in their marketing and the storytelling and their communication that was sort of impacting the success of their products. So there's so many exciting biotech startups making really bold breakthroughs in the science, but unless they're actually able to communicate, market, and ultimately sell their product and remain a viable company and business, that product or drug or therapy, it won't be able to hit the market or go all the way to patients. So that bit of communications I realized was super important. And there did seem to be a bit of a gap between, particularly in these sort of startup companies, of these science-led founders that are absolutely obsessed with the science and the scientific team, but they didn't really have the knowledge or the interest even or the capabilities to market and communicate their science effectively in a sort of marketing manner. They often did, maybe they'd have a single marketing manager working on their team, but they might not understand the science correctly and they just want to run Google ads, Facebook ads, go to conferences and have a booth. So I found myself having that interest in ensuring the marketability and success of a company, but also being a PhD scientist, could sort of bridge that gap. Companies quite quickly saw the value of having that person sort of in between, communicating the science and the product and messaging. So yeah, it seemed to be the right time, the right place for the service I was offering, and it really took off. And sort of the first year was myself and my partner Ellen. She was also doing some scientific writing. By the second year, we had so many new projects coming in that we had to hire someone. So even though I was part time, we made our first hire. Sarah King, she was another PhD scientist. So I suppose that sort of at that stage we were a company of three, but I suppose that still maybe counts as an agency. And then since then, the third and fourth years of my PhD, the company and the agency just grew a lot. So now we're up to about a team of 10. So certainly quite organic. I've been finished my PhD for about a year and a half now, and now just full, full scale ahead with the agency.
Congratulations on finishing your PhD.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of hours back in my day to focus on the business.
Yeah, so how did you balance the two? Like, it takes so much time to do research, and then at the same time, you're also thinking about helping companies tailor their messaging on the side.
So, I mean, just early mornings, really. I was up about 5 a.m. for about 4 years. So, I try to get into the lab as early as possible. About 7, I'd leave. I'd be the first one in and the first one out. Um, I did try to be quite strict with separating my PhD life from everything else. I know a lot of people fall into this trap of thinking you need to give 24/7 of your life for 5 years into your PhD. I treated it more like a 9 to 5 job. So, I had the afternoons and the evenings to work in the business and the weekends. I think I knew, sort of halfway through with that, I wasn't going to stay in academia and focusing on my medical writing, scientific writing career seemed like a good path I wanted to go in. So, I obviously the PhD was the bulk of my focus, but still plenty of time outside of that to ensure my more, what I thought my long term career was going to be. I still had plenty of time to focus on that and ensure it was a success.
I find it admirable that you've organized your time so cleanly, like to give yourself the 9 to 5 to do your research and then do the science communications on the side. I admire that because when I started out as a writer, I realized that I was spending a lot of time to my PhD, even after the working hours. And it got me so stuck in a bubble that I didn't realize that there were so many other things I could do with science that could make a measurable impact on the people that we're trying to serve through research. So for like the biggest thing that comes to mind is writing, like you said, storytelling, telling a story behind your research and making sure it connects with the people that you're trying to reach out to. And the word storytelling comes out a lot among content marketers. So, in your eyes, what is storytelling? And how does your copy reflect your definition of storytelling?
Companies love to focus on themselves. Hey, here's our product. It does this, this, and this. But people don't really care about that at the end of the day. You want to know, does your challenge in the lab, can it be solved with this tool or product? And the technical specifications, less so important. If you're getting exactly what you want, it makes your day easier. If you as a company can't communicate to your customer or your prospect why your tool or product is the right choice for them, then you have an issue with your storytelling. Getting the message across to them in as few words as possible, why you're speaking directly to them, what you're offering is specific to their needs, their challenges, and what you offer is a real solution that's worth their time and money. I think that's storytelling, getting that point across as a company effectively.
So I find that your focus on the audience, the people that you're trying to reach out to, is something that a lot of companies don't fully understand. That's also been aligned with my own experience writing for biotech companies to their customers. And oftentimes they want to talk about features. You're right, like you said, features like we can automate this process in just a couple minutes, or we can provide microliter volume of accuracy, like within a really tiny small coefficient of variation. And you're right, like just because it has all those features doesn't mean that's something that a customer would care about. So it sounds like how you frame those benefits to the audience, like those features and the benefits to the audience, is a big part of what storytelling is. And I was also wondering, as a follow up, does prose come into play here too? Like how someone words the sentences?
Yes, I think going, in terms of the positioning of the product, I came across a website recently. It was basically a DNA sequencing tool. And I actually couldn't make out from the homepage or the website, like if it was a physical instrument, was it a software, was it a contracted service? Because it said what it did. So we do DNA sequencing faster, cheaper, but the communication around it was so poor. Even though I was sort of interested in reaching out to this company to pitch our services, I spent quite a lot of time on the website. I still couldn't make out exactly what the product does, what solution it offers. Is it the challenges it solves, what form it is? There are so many questions remaining, and I think that just goes back to your point on storytelling. You as a company can't easily explain what you do, who you serve. You can't expect a customer to work that out themselves from the 30 seconds that they're going to spend on your website, and when there's so many other competitors in the field. So as you said, getting away from just focusing on the features of the product and really focusing on the audience and the customer, making them felt understood as a person. Sometimes you come across, not even in science, but in any product you're looking at, whether it's a new phone or a computer, and you think, wow, this website or this landing page is really speaking directly to me. These are all the challenges I'm facing at the moment. It'd be great if I could tick these off. So I think that's really what you want to get across when it comes to content and storytelling.
And that's a very good point, because a lot of companies will want to talk about their features. Like I've seen, we can do this cheaper, we can do this better. But with everyone doing that now, it seems like it's gotten much harder to tailor messaging towards a specific audience. Now, there's two parts to my follow-up question. First off, how do you know whether that difficulty in differentiating your product from others is because the product isn't ready, as opposed to the phrase, like just poor phrasing? And second question, how would a company be able to know exactly what kinds of wording or phrasing or messaging resonates best with their customers?
Yeah, I think there can be an issue with startups jumping into a product quickly and maybe without validating it. As scientists, we can get quite excited with, I've seen quite a few startups where they'll be spun out of a PhD or a postdoc in a sort of academic lab, someone sort of refined a protocol or, made a bit of a homemade tool, and then they're thinking, wow, this is brilliant, it's perfect for what I need. I'm going to commercialize this, make it into a product and sell it. But maybe what they're doing is so specific to their one lab and this one experiment or workflow that there really isn't a market for it or an interest. So I think in some cases, maybe the marketing is poor because the positioning's bad and maybe there isn't a real use case for this product. So I think spending more time in the market research, ensuring there is a market for it, as you said, and then trying to work on refining the messaging. So definitely before you launch a large marketing campaign, a content campaign, or even launch your website, do that market research. Get together a group of scientists that would be using your product, speak to them. As you said, present them with various phrases or messaging you can use to highlight the USPs of this product, what it does well, how you're going to communicate that, and just get their feedback on it. I think as a scientific founder, you can be quite, you're super excited on the product, you know exactly what it does, and you think the way you communicate it is going to land well with people and get them excited. But often in case, they don't care about your product or what you've just spent 5 years of your life doing. You can't expect them to have the same interest in your product. So, and I think scientists are super open to engaging with people when it comes to talking about science. Reach out to or email a bunch of scientists in the field or the market that you're interested in, ask them for a quick catch up. You want to get their feedback on an exciting new product and how you're going to communicate it. I think most PhDs or postdocs are more than happy to sit down and talk to you over a quick 20-minute Zoom call and give you their feedback. We like to feel like we're contributing to the field and the science, and if we can do that by refining products and helping products succeed, I think most people will be quite into that. So in other fields, you might need to do some expensive market research where you go out surveying the general public. I think in science, that isn't the case. So you can quite easily find 10 to 20 scientists that are happy to speak to you and just get their feedback.
A lot of what makes a product work or not work will also align with how well your marketing will work out. Because if you don't understand why your product works so well with your scientists that you're targeting, you're not going to get the messaging right, and you're not going to get the customers that you're looking for. And so that ties in really well with my next question. What are the most common audiences you hear your customers wanting to connect better with?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is the issue of companies not sort of segmenting their audience well enough, sort of wanting to speak to everyone at the same time in a single content campaign. And that generally works out very poorly. If you're a sort of instrument provider in the life sciences, just selling to scientists, doesn't really work. Because like, who are you talking to? Chemists, biologists, within that, and within biology, neuroscience, cancer research, there's so many sub audiences within just science that if you do, say, a campaign, how our pipettes can improve your science, that doesn't talk to anybody. No one's going to feel heard, and no one's going to feel like you're speaking to them. So really trying to break down your audience to someone that's sort of relatable. So how our pipettes can excel your cancer biology workflows to get better tumor organoids, something like this. Now someone's saying, wow, okay, they're speaking directly to me. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm a cancer biologist. I work on organoids or tumor samples. And then, throwing in a beneficial outcome there directly to them. So, I don't know, more precise tumor sample pipetting or something. So now you have a campaign actually targeting a specific audience segment. They can feel spoken to. You can get across how your solution actually addresses their single challenge and provides real value. So I think that's the main thing, is really focusing on that, because you can't speak to everyone in a single campaign. So companies often get around that. They'll have application pages on their website. So even if they are targeting many segments of the life sciences, they'll have an application page for neuroscience, immunology, cancer biology, stem cell biology, etc. And then in terms of sort of content campaigns, you might run 3 or 4 campaigns a year, each campaign targeting a specific audience. So that's really the main thing, trying to really pinpoint, they say like if you try to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And it is hard because if you think about like biotechnology as a term, it's such a broad group now. It can be like biologics, so like any drugs that aren't small molecule sort of fall under biotech. But you also have biotech instruments, so like 10x genomics, making all DNA sequencers, for the biotech field. You've got all these instrument providers, sort of service providers in biotech. It's such an umbrella term now that, as you say, there's so many various audiences within that. But again, it's all just understanding your audience inside and out, their daily challenges, what solutions that they need to improve their workday, and then, starting from your audience's needs and actually building your content campaign in reverse from that, versus most companies want to just start with their product and then force that into what their audience wants, but you need to start the other way.
So it starts so just to clarify, you're starting from what the customer wants, even within their segmentation, and then you build up your marketing content from there. So it's not just from you to them, it's from them to you to them, because you understand what they need, and then you write the content that speaks to their needs directly.
Exactly. Because if you're trying to sell to someone and you say, you're just forcing your product onto them. Hey, here's my product. You should buy this. Here it is. Here's the features. You're just going to scare people off, particularly scientists.
Yeah.
We don't like being sold to.
Right.
We probably all had either those cold outreach emails from a sales rep that you just delete straight away, or those cases at events, or if they get into your building, you have like a sales rep coming into your lab.
Yes. I've had that happen so often in my own PhD days, and it was often like, okay, thank you, please leave.
Yeah, and you sort of want to feel like as a scientist, you're looking at the data, you're sort of analyzing the product, and you're coming to your own choice to buy the product. We don't like being sold to, so.
For sure.
So you want to avoid that, focusing on your product and trying to push it to your audience. Where we always advise, okay, let's understand the audience, their pain points, their challenges, list them out. Which one of these challenges, does our product or service address and that we can solve? And then sort of reverse engineering your content campaign around that. So, when we talk about content, we almost don't want to be focused on your product. We can sort of organically market it in sort of quite organic ways throughout the content, but we don't be starting and focusing on the content. We focus on the challenge that we're addressing, the solution we're providing, showing the audience that we know what they're suffering with, and presenting them a solution. Then at the end we can say, hey, and we also sell this product that does all of this really well. We're confident that we can solve exactly what you're looking for. Here's the product. If you want to learn more, you can click through, and here's the product page.
Fantastic. So as a follow-up to our discussion, with so many different kinds of scientists to talk to, patient groups and the like, how can companies tailor their KPIs to know how well they're connecting with these specific segments of customers?
Yeah, the KPIs is an interesting field. There's a lot more to it. We'll have clients saying, we're interested in a content campaign. What are the key KPIs we should be tracking? And it's really specific to various factors. Firstly, what is the business objective of this content campaign? Is it building sort of scientific credibility and authority in a sort of new market? Is it educating a very technical audience? Is it driving sales and supporting your sales team? Because each of them, and there's other objectives you can have, they'll have their own sort of precise KPIs that can be used to track their performance. Say the objective was, to improve awareness and authority building for a new brand or a new product. This is sort of quite important for sort of early stage companies. Various KPIs that we could track are things like time spent on a page. We don't want people just clicking in and clicking off straight away. We want to ensure that they are reading the content long enough that it suggests that they're trusting your content, they're taking it as a sort of authoritative content, and they're willing to spend the time to take it in. Oftentimes you'll click onto a website and you can just tell that the content's poor quality, and you say, okay, this isn't trustworthy, I'll click off. So things like time spent on a page. If we see a sort of audience sectors or institutions or sort of IP addresses continually coming back to your website, you now know that they're treating you as a sort of trusted source. Things like citations and backlinks, if you've got other labs or blogs or websites backlinking and sort of referencing your content, you know now that you're being treated as a trusted source within the field, the scientific field. Yeah, the KPI thing, it's what are the objectives? What are the company stage? An early stage biotech might be more focused on things like authority and engagement quality, where a company in the growth stage are more focused on sort of lead quality, conversions, sales related KPIs. There's no 2 or 3 key KPIs that are like must have for any campaigns. It's really specific to the objective of the company, what stage they're at, the sort of buying stage of their target audience. So they do need to be tailored to the each individual campaign almost.
Sounds like there's a lot of intricacies that come with setting up a marketing campaign and making sure that it does what it's supposed to do. And I imagine that's something that you had to teach to a lot of PhD scientists as you build Co-Labb. Because from what I understand, you build Co-Labb from a small but tight-knit team of PhD scientists who are passionate about science communication. What are the personality types and attitudes one would need to succeed as a content marketer? And how do you teach all these aspects of content marketing to those that you're working with right now?
Yeah, so I actually think that PhDs make a really good starting point for sort of content writing, content marketing. I think the sort of fundamentals for an effective content campaign is firstly sort of understanding the science. As scientists, if we're reading something or we're ingesting content that's written by someone that doesn't understand it, you can see it from a mile away. As we just touched on, you're going to click off it straight away. You can't trust it. You're going to assume it's written by someone that isn't in the field, just a generic copywriter, or maybe it's come out of AI or something. So you got to understand the science. You got to understand the product and the sort of the field. So something like neuroscience or oncology, understanding that field, and possibly most importantly, understanding the audience. And I think as a PhD, you sort of automatically tick all of them. So within reason, but quite broadly across it. We got, some of our teams, we have, one of our writers, Owen, he's a cancer biologist. Catherine's a sort of immunologist. So we have all these specialities in various fields, but even outside of their own sort of PhD area, they still understand the science, the product, and the audience. When we're writing content, we're writing it to our former selves. So we always think, okay, we're in the lab now and you're trying to troubleshoot, some cell culture experiment, and you're trying to get some valuable information. What did you want to read? What's the sort of the language style? So we always write, in that case, that we're trying to write and content market and communicate to our former selves. Because, if you come in with it from a sort of marketing style language, and as soon as the sort of content looks salesy and markety, you're going to lose that trust and interest from the client straight away. So I think as a starting point, PhDs make a really good content writer. Generally, we understand the audience, the challenges, and the science, and how to relate that to their needs. And then it's just really, we do need to be somewhat sort of creative and engaging. I suppose that's the most difficult part of scientific content. It needs to be scientific, it needs to get the facts across as science, but particularly if it's a long form content piece, it still needs to be engaging and somewhat enjoyable to read. So we always try to bring in, personal stories where we can, personal learnings that we've learned from the lab, give that sort of expert opinion, and make it so when someone's reading this, they think, okay, I'm reading this from someone that's done this in the past. They've got some interesting takes. They're saying some funny little challenges that they found in the lab that I also encounter. So trying to make it a bit more personable, engaging, and creative where possible.
Like, I've seen this even in authors, right? Like, they'll have these long writer's blocks where they just can't even come up with the right words to say for any given moment. And you can't just wave good writing like a magic wand. You need to get good copy in through just letting the ideas incubate, and then maybe there's a flash of creativity that says, oh yeah, I know exactly how to write it. Is it the same thing with science writing?
A little bit. I mean, it depends on the form. So if you're writing social media content, things like that, you can definitely be a bit more engaging because people are going to be scrolling past, not spending so much time. So you need something, a funny little hook engagement at the beginning that draws them in. If it's something like an application note, in that case, the scientists probably sought this out. They're looking for more credible information and more technical information. So, in those cases, maybe a bit less appropriate to be injecting some humor into it. But yeah, it's all really content specific. The audience, what stage of the buying cycle they're in, the content piece, the objectives again. So yeah, it really depends on each client and each project.
For sure. So you have a lot of things to think about even within your own writing teams, but somehow but through a lot of good work, you've put everything together. So just to put all that we've talked about here together, can you tell me about your proudest success story? Like, was there one particular client that you worked with where it really highlights why content marketing and storytelling can be so important for success with a biotech company? Like, do you have one success story in mind that you really like to share?
We've had quite a lot. I mean, we work really closely with our clients. We're still working with my very first client, about 5 years ago. That's a success story in itself, that we provide enough value to them that they've stayed working with us for 5 years. I suppose as an agency, what I'm super proud of is both a sort of lack of client churn. So, we really very rarely have clients like terminate our contract because they're not happy with the service. That's sort of never happened. We're still working with a handful of our very first clients, and sometimes our clients will they'll pause for a while because they don't have the budget, but they always come back when the time's right. So super proud of that sort of client retention that we have. I think it's just a testament to our team and the service and the quality of work that they provide. Also within our team, super proud that we still have our very first hire. So Sarah King that I mentioned. So she's been working with us for about 4 years, and within our team we've got very little of churn within the team or people leaving the company. So super proud of that as well. I think as a company, I did get a sort of testimonial recently from Cytiva. So they're a big sort of $20 billion biotech instrument company.
Wow.
We ran one of their content campaigns last year. They said to us that it achieved the best results of any campaign they've run. So that was obviously a super proud moment for us for such a big company. They got so many resources and thousands of scientific staff internally. They still see the value of working with like a tiny company like us of 10 people. Yeah, super proud of that quote and the results that we got for them. Yeah, I think it just shows even as a small company or as a freelancer, if you've got the skills and expertise in whatever specialized area that you have, that even as an individual or a small company that you can still provide real value to a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. You'd be surprised even these huge players, the biggest companies in the world, still need to lean on little guys like us to get the right content made. So
that's amazing. Congratulations on such a feat. Like, I know what it feels like to be able to work at a big company and then they say like your work was so good and we saw like measurable benefits in doing so. I know what that feels like too. So I'm very happy for you that you were able to make such a big accomplishment with such a big multi-billion-dollar company.
I think it's, for your own confidence, it's great, and for everyone in the team, it sort of validates what you offer when a big company sees the value of bringing you in to help out when they probably could find that expertise internally if they went looking, or they could just hire in someone if there's something unique about the service that you offer. Even the biggest companies in the world will come and will require that help.
Fantastic. I love hearing those kinds of stories, and I want to be able to see other biotech companies benefit from the work that you're doing. So if a biotech company wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it?
So, you can check out our website, co-labb.co.uk. That's co-labb.co.uk. Just put in a request there, or you can schedule a content consultation. Also super active on LinkedIn. If you want to find me on there, reach out, we can connect and chat. Yeah, always happy to talk to people online.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on. And I hope we can continue to keep talking about content marketing like this.
Yeah, cheers, Paul. That was fun. I always enjoyed talking about it, so let's catch up again soon.